Sunlight filtered softly through the window, brushing Huma's face with warmth. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting slowly to the brightness. But the moment her gaze landed on the wall clock, her heart skipped a beat. 11 a.m. She sat up in shock. That wasn't normal. She had never slept this late, not even on the most exhausting days. A wave of anxiety rushed over her. Where was Rayhan? Her eyes darted to the other side of the bed. Empty. Her 9-year-old brother-in-law was nowhere in sight. Maybe he had woken up earlier, hungry. He usually had breakfast by 8. Feeling guilty, she swung her legs off the bed, only to wince in pain. A sharp ache surged through her body, as if she had been in a physical struggle during the night. Every joint, every muscle screamed. She looked down at herself and froze. Her appearance was wrong. Her clothes were crumpled, her hair wildly undone, hanging around her shoulders. She always braided her hair before bed, always. The top 2 buttons of her nightshirt were open. One of them was completely missing. Her heart pounded as her eyes scanned the bed, and there it was. The missing button glinted under a fold in the bedsheet. She picked it up slowly, holding it tightly in her fist as questions raced through her mind. That button had been perfectly intact last night. What had happened while she was asleep? Just then, the door creaked open. Rayhan peeked in with a smile and ran over to her. "You're awake, Pobby. I already ate bread and jam. I brought you some milk, too." He pressed his little face into her chest as if nothing was wrong. Huma forced a smile and gently stroked his hair. "I'm sorry, Rayhan. I should have woken up earlier. You must have been waiting." Rayhan shook his head. "Not at all. You looked tired. You need rest." He ran off to fetch her milk while she sat there, button in hand, trying to silence the uneasy whispers in her heart. She couldn't ask Rayhan about the disarray. It wouldn't be fair. He was just a child. As she drank the milk he brought and forced herself to start the day, she buried the discomfort deep inside. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this was only the beginning. A quiet horror had already begun to unfold, and the full weight of it would strike like a thunderclap in the days to come. The next morning, the unease returned with even greater force. Huma opened her eyes slowly, already sensing something wasn't right. As her vision adjusted, a chill ran down her spine. The bedsheet was pulled halfway off the mattress. Her dupatta lay on the floor, crumpled like it had been thrown there. Her shirt was disheveled again, one side slipping slightly off her shoulder. It felt disturbingly familiar, like déjà vu. And just like yesterday, her body ached with a strange soreness she couldn't explain. Confused and alarmed, she sat up, scanning the room for Rayhan. The boy had once again risen before her, but today she couldn't ignore the lingering discomfort and the chaotic state of the bed. She took a breath, hesitating. Then for the first time, she asked him. "Rayhan," she said as gently as she could, "what happened to the bedsheet? It looks like someone pulled it really hard during the night." To her surprise, the boy burst into laughter. "Oh, that. I must have fallen off the bed again last night," he said casually. "I think I pulled the sheet down with me. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor." Huma's heart raced. "You fell? Did you hurt yourself?" He shook his head with a grin. No, I'm fine, don't worry." She knelt beside him, quickly checking his arms and forehead for any signs of injury. There were none. Just the same childlike innocence in his eyes, and that sweet voice that always melted her anger and fear. Still, something didn't feel right. She told herself it was just exhaustion, perhaps grief. After all, her mourning period had just ended. Her husband's death was still fresh, a gaping wound in her soul. There was no one else in the house now, just her and Rayhan. Her parents had dropped off groceries a few days ago, but she had insisted on staying behind, not wanting to leave the boy alone. The house was quiet again. She got up, forced herself to focus on chores, and helped Rayhan with his breakfast. They moved through the day like normal, but inside she was spiraling. Something was happening, something she couldn't name, and yet she didn't want to suspect, not of Rayhan, never of him. That night, Rayhan once again insisted on sleeping beside her. He had been terrified sleeping alone lately, and Huma, still treating him like a son, agreed without question. After all, it was only for comfort, just a child needing safety in her presence. But in the darkness, as she closed her eyes, a tiny voice within whispered louder than before. Something is wrong. Days passed. Huma tried to bury her unease beneath routine. She cooked, she cleaned, she took care of Rayhan. Every time he laughed or hugged her, it felt wrong to even think of doubting him. But each morning brought new signs that something wasn't right. By the third night, Huma began dreading sleep. It was as though she were living two different lives, one where everything appeared normal and one in the dark where shadows stretched longer than they should. The mornings always began the same. She'd wake up feeling sore, disoriented, and oddly exposed. Her dupatta would be missing, her hair untied, her clothes wrinkled and misaligned. Her body ached as though she had been twisted in restless sleep. She kept asking herself, why couldn't she remember anything? Rayhan never said anything suspicious. Every morning, he was the same. Cheerful, innocent, devoted. If she questioned him about the disorder of the bed, he always had an answer. I think I kicked the blanket off. Or maybe I tossed and turned too much. His childlike tone made her feel guilty for even asking. And yet, the unease only deepened. After 5 nights of sharing her room with Rayhan, Huma reached a breaking point. Each night ended in the same disturbing silence, and each day began with her feeling a little more disconnected from herself. She didn't dare speak to anyone, not her parents, not even Rayhan. What could she say? That her 9-year-old brother-in-law was somehow connected to this creeping horror that took over her sleep? But she couldn't shake the thought that something was being done to her, that her body was no longer just hers. Then, on the 6th day, her eldest sister-in-law came to visit. She smiled and embraced Huma, masking the usual hostility with concern. But her true purpose became obvious when she turned to Rayhan, cooing and teasing, trying to convince him to come stay at her house for a few days. You've been with your Bobby all this time, she said sweetly, stroking his hair. Come spend some time with your sisters, too, Rayhan clung tightly to Huma's side, shaking his head in refusal. No, I don't want to go. It was Huma who gently pried his hands away. You should go, Rayhan, she said, stroking his cheek. They love you too. You must give them time or they'll feel hurt. His eyes welled up as he looked at her. But I'll miss you, she forced a smile. I'll miss you too. As he left with heavy steps and tearful glances, Huma felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. That night, for the first time in nearly a week, she slept alone. And when she woke up the next morning, something felt different. Her clothes were untouched. The bed was perfectly made. There was no pain in her body. But before she could even process the calm, her stomach lurched. A wave of nausea rose in her throat. The world around her tilted. Something was still very, very wrong. The nausea was relentless. Huma sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her stomach, sweat gathering at her brow. It wasn't just dizziness or fatigue. It was a deep, churning sickness that seemed to rise from within her bones. Her hands trembled as she reached for the glass of water beside her. The moment the cold liquid touched her lips, her stomach revolted. She rushed to the bathroom and vomited violently. Her breathing became shallow. She wiped her mouth and stared into the mirror. Her reflection was pale, drained. Something about her eyes frightened her. They looked like they knew something she didn't. Later that day, the vomiting returned, again and again, until Huma could barely stand. Panic clawed at her chest. She had no strength left to pretend. Something was terribly wrong with her body. By late afternoon, she wrapped herself in a long shawl, concealed her face, and left the house quietly, heading to a nearby clinic. Every step felt like she was dragging lead. Her heart pounded not just from sickness, but from fear. She didn't know what she feared more, the illness or the possibility that her intuition had been right all along. The doctor, an older woman with a calm demeanor, examined her with clinical precision. Huma tried to explain her symptoms, but her voice cracked. After a few questions, the doctor ordered an ultrasound. Huma's heart skipped a beat. She laid on the examination table, cold gel spread across her stomach, screen flickering above her. As the machine whirred and beeped, the doctor's brow furrowed. She stared at the screen longer than usual, then turned to Huma. You're 6 weeks pregnant, she said plainly. Time stopped. Huma blinked. I... What? You're 6 weeks pregnant, the doctor repeated, slower this time. You didn't know? I'm... I'm a widow, Huma whispered, her voice cracking like glass. My husband died almost 6 months ago. The doctor's eyes narrowed. She glanced at the monitor again. Then you need to ask yourself who the father is. I only tell you what the screen shows. Huma sat up, trembling violently. Her throat went dry. There must be a mistake. Can you check again? Please? The doctor obliged. Another scan, another silence. It's confirmed, she said coldly. 6 weeks pregnant. Huma's vision blurred. Her ears rang. Her skin felt like it was on fire. She staggered out of the clinic, ultrasound report crushed in her trembling hands. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear because no matter how much she tried to deny it, she knew something had happened during those 5 nights. Something unspeakable. And there was only one person who had been with her, only one possibility. The image of Rehan, her innocent, sweet little Rehan, flashed before her eyes. Her knees buckled. She fell to the ground, sobbing into her shawl. Her cries were silent, her body shaking. In that moment, Huma didn't know if she was more afraid of the truth or of what it would do to the child she had loved like a son. As Huma stumbled back toward the house, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the street like silent witnesses. Her shawl clung to her face, soaked in sweat and tears. The ultrasound report was still in her trembling hand, now crumpled and moist. Every step felt heavier than the last. She didn't know how to process what she had just heard. She opened the door, praying no one would be home. But fate had other plans. Her elder sister-in-law, Najma, stood in the living room, arms crossed, her eyes sharp and full of suspicion. Rehan sat quietly in the corner, swinging his legs off the sofa, unaware of the emotional storm about to erupt. Najma's eyes narrowed. "Where have you been?" she snapped. "Out roaming while we're here looking after your house?" Huma tried to respond, but the words got stuck in her throat. She clutched the report closer, trying to walk past her, but Najma snatched it from her hand with the swiftness of a hawk. She unfolded it, read the headline, "Ultrasound report, gestation age 6 weeks," and froze. The room turned to ice. "What is this?" Najma whispered at first, then her voice rose like a thunderclap. "You disgusting woman, you vile, shameful creature, how dare you!" Before Huma could explain, before she could even think, Najma's hand shot across her face with a deafening crack. The slap echoed through the house like a curse. Rehan jumped up, startled, confused. "Tell me," Najma screamed, shaking Huma by the shoulders, "whose sin are you carrying? Who have you been sleeping with?" I don't know," Huma stammered, falling to her knees. "I swear to God, I don't know." "Don't play innocent with me," Najma howled, her face red with rage. "You've blackened the memory of my brother. He trusted you, and you turned this house into a place of filth." Tears streamed down Huma's face. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't explain what even she didn't understand. Rehan, trembling, walked slowly toward them. "Please don't hurt her," he whispered, voice shaking. "Stay out of this," Najma snapped. "You don't know what this woman has done." But Rehan didn't move. His small frame stood between Huma and his furious sister. And then, with sudden courage, his lips quivered as he said something that made the earth stop turning. "Shahzad gave me medicine to put in Bobby's milk." Everything went still. Najma blinked. "What did you just say?" Rehan gulped. "He gave me money and chocolate. Said it was for Bobby's health. Told me to give her the milk every night." Huma stared at him, her heart beating so loud it hurt. Rehan wasn't the monster. He was the key, a child manipulated, a pawn. And Shahzad, the neighbor whose eyes had always lingered too long, was suddenly a shadow that grew darker than anyone had imagined. Silence filled the room, heavier than ever before. Rehan's trembling voice had pierced the chaos like a blade. He wasn't crying, but his eyes held the weight of guilt no child should ever bear. "I didn't know. I thought I was helping her," he said softly, his fingers nervously twisting the edge of his shirt. Najma stared at him in stunned disbelief. "What do you mean, helping her?" Rehan looked up, confused and scared. Shahzad Pai told me you were very weak after Pai's death. He said you needed strength, and he gave me some medicines. He told me to mix them in your milk every night. He said they'd make you feel better. Huma's entire body froze. Her mind rewound to those 5 nights, nights she couldn't remember, only feel. The unexplained pain, the disheveled clothes, the broken buttons, the strange way she woke up each morning with shame she couldn't name. And now it all made sense. She stumbled back, her hand over her mouth. Those weren't vitamins. They were sedatives. Rayhan nodded innocently. Maybe because every time I drank it too, I fell asleep so fast. Deep sleep, I didn't even know when. Najma took a step back, her anger melting into horror. Oh, God. Shahzad used you to get to her? Rayhan's lips trembled. He said I should take care of Bobby. He said, you're all she has. The reality was unbearable. A grown predator had manipulated a grieving, innocent boy, twisting his love for Huma into a weapon, and he had drugged her, violated her, for 5 nights, while she slept beside the only child who still gave her reason to breathe. Tears poured from Huma's eyes. I trusted you, she whispered. Not to Rayhan, but to the memory of the house that once felt safe. I thought you were just a filthy man with a filthy mouth, but you were planning something darker all along. Najma's eyes turned to steel. We're not staying silent. Without waiting, she sent one of the younger sisters to call the others. Minutes later, both arrived. They read the report, heard the confession, and for the first time, their hands didn't rise. Their eyes didn't accuse. Because the truth was undeniable now. Their dead brother's widow had been preyed upon, and their youngest brother was used as the unknowing instrument. Rayhan sobbed quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Huma knelt in front of him, placing a trembling hand on his head. You were used too, she whispered, her voice cracking. This wasn't your fault. Najma stood, her voice cold. Shahzad will pay for this. No more silence. The sisters, united for the first time, walked out the door, toward Shahzad's house, toward justice. Huma looked up at the sky. Something inside her had broken, but something else, something fierce, had begun to rise. This wasn't just her pain anymore, it was her war. The air inside the house was heavy. The atmosphere, once filled with quiet mourning, had turned into a storm of judgment and shame. Huma sat silently on the corner of the sofa, her fingers trembling as she clutched the medical report. Her sister-in-law stood before her, voice rising with every question, demanding answers Huma herself didn't have. Whose child is this? Tell me. Who have you brought this disgrace upon us for? Tears poured from Huma's eyes. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to explain that she didn't know how this had happened, that she had trusted everyone, especially within these 4 walls, that her soul was more shattered than anyone could imagine, but the words wouldn't come. The room fell into stunned silence when Rayhan entered. His young face was pale. Seeing the tears, the shouting, and the report, he hesitated, then walked straight toward them. I have to say something, he whispered, voice shaking. Everyone turned to look at him. I didn't know anything at first, he began, but now I think I understand. A few weeks ago, Shahzad Pai from next door gave me chocolates and some pills. He told me they were for Bobby's strength. He said I should mix them in her milk because she was becoming weak. Gasps filled the room. Huma's breath caught in her throat. Rayhan continued, tears now streaming. He said if I helped her take the milk, she'd feel better. I didn't understand what those pills were. I just wanted to help her. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't mean to hurt her. I thought I was doing something good. The realization sank in like a thunderclap. The puzzle pieces fit together. The nights of weakness, the unexplained exhaustion, the mornings of confusion. It hadn't been chance. It had been manipulation. Huma had unknowingly been targeted while her heart was healing. Her sisters-in-law fell silent. One sat down heavily. The anger in their eyes gave way to shock and then sorrow. Huma stood slowly and walked to Rayhan. Her hand gently cupped his cheek. You were just a child who loved his family. You didn't know better. I don't blame you. He wept, burying his face in her embrace. Later that day, the eldest sister-in-law went straight to Shahzad's house. With quiet dignity and firm words, she confronted his mother. Your son has taken advantage of grief and trust. We're asking once. Not again. Tell him to leave this neighborhood, or we will make sure everyone knows what he has done." By evening, Shahzad had packed and vanished, his shadow no longer looming over the house. But the trauma remained. 2 weeks later, Huma suffered a miscarriage. There were no words, only silence. But within that silence was a strange peace, as if a chapter had closed. And as Huma held Rayhan close that night, she didn't feel like a broken woman anymore. She felt like someone who had survived and found her purpose. The days that followed were calm on the surface, but a storm continued to churn inside Huma. Though Shahzad had left and the child she never asked for was no longer within her, she was left carrying something far heavier. A wound no one could see, stitched with betrayal, shame, and helplessness. Her body had begun to recover, but her spirit still felt fragile, cracked in places only she could sense. Rayhan, in his own quiet way, had transformed. He was no longer the carefree child who once demanded his Bobby's undivided attention. He was suddenly more reserved, mature beyond his years, and visibly devoted to Huma. Each day he would help her around the house, bringing her tea without being asked, folding clothes carefully, and even trying to cook small meals, though most of them needed rescuing. One evening, as Huma sat by the window, staring into the fading light, Rayhan walked up behind her and softly placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm really sorry for everything," he whispered. "If I could take it all back, I would." She turned to him slowly, her eyes tired but kind. "You didn't do anything wrong, Rayhan. You were lied to. You were a child acting out of love." He shook his head. "But love shouldn't hurt someone, should it?" His question cut deep. Huma reached out and pulled him into her arms, hugging him tight. "No, it shouldn't. But sometimes people with bad intentions use love to get what they want. That's not your fault. What matters is that you told the truth even when it was hard." Rayhan nodded slowly, his eyes shimmering with emotion. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Word had spread silently in the neighborhood that something had happened in Huma's house, but no one dared to ask directly. Her sisters-in-law, once critical and bitter, had grown quiet too. Not out of guilt alone, but perhaps finally understanding the weight of womanhood, of isolation, of being judged without evidence. One evening, the eldest sister-in-law came to her. She didn't speak much, only placed her hand over Huma's and said, "You've been through enough. I'm sorry I didn't stand with you sooner." Huma gave a small nod in reply, though her heart was still hesitant to trust again. Rayhan, meanwhile, started calling her Ami softly, shyly, as though testing whether he had the right. And Huma, after a long pause, let him. Not because she had to, but because in that single word she felt seen, respected, needed.